Is it possible to use our fear to help us empower our love? I used to think the answer was no, but this month, when our learning and worship theme is widening the circle, I've come to see fear differently. In the words of Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman, fear is love trying its best in the dark. Today we explore the connections among fear, love, and widening the circle to welcome others. So welcome to this worship service of the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock. I'm Reverend Jay Brooks, and I minister to this congregation along with the Reverend Jennifer Brower and our lead minister, the Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore. Our worship associate today is Brian Mullers. Music director Stephen Michael Smith directs our choir today, and our pianist is Nathaniel Lanassa. Our soloist is Sarah Moulton-Foe. In this congregation, we create loving religious community, encourage spiritual growth, and build a more just and joyful world. Ours is a religious tradition that embraces the wisdom of all faiths and values diversity. We believe in using science, reason, and the gifts of the Spirit to explore life's meaning and mystery. We believe that you do not have to love alike, to think alike, to love alike. We gather on Sunday mornings to restore the balance of our spirits, to celebrate the joys of life and find the strength to meet its sorrows. So now we enter into a time of worship together. Let's allow music to center us in a spirit of open-hearted compassion.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Our opening words today are written by our lead minister, the Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore, and published in Voices from the Margins. May what we know of suffering, redemption, and salvation bring us to love. Having been the other, may our hearts exclude no one.
The congregation's words of affirmation express the purpose and intention of our gathering in religious community. The words are on your screen. You are invited to speak them along with me. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, this do we affirm and covenant with each other. Each Sunday, we take a special collection to support a nonprofit group that helps our local community's most vulnerable people. This month and next, donations go to Upholding Humanity, a Long Island interfaith coalition that is helping refugees from Afghanistan. Upholding Humanity is working to provide household goods and basic necessities for Afghani families who are here and who need everything. Make a contribution on our website or through PayPal or by text message. In these days, when compassion fatigue is a real thing, let's make this congregation a wellspring of empathy. Open the window and let the love fly in.
Claudia Rankine is an award-winning author, poet, and recipient of a MacArthur Fellowship. A professor at Yale University, she's well known for her remarkable book, Citizen. In her teaching and writing, Rankine has explored the challenge of being a Black woman and having conversations with white Americans about race. Engaging with the audience that came to hear more about Citizen, she continued those conversations. Her recent play, The White Card, emerged from a question and answer session that Professor Rankine describes in the play's preface. She writes, "One evening, during a question and answer session, a white, middle-aged man stood up. After movingly addressing my reading from Citizen, he asked me, 'What can I do for you? How can I help you?' His question did the almost imperceptible work of positioning him outside the problems Citizen interrogates, while maintaining his position of superiority relative to me in his act of offering to help me. He would help answer not only my problems, but those of all Black people, which he only at that moment recognized, but otherwise was not implicated in or touched by. He seemed oblivious to the realization that our problems as a society are dependent on his presence, despite my project of saying this in all the ways I know how. There was so much that could be said, but in the minutes we had for our exchange, I simply responded to the man, 'I think the question you should be asking is, what can you do for you?' He didn't appreciate my answer. From him rose an anger I confess I did not expect. 'If that is how you answer questions,' he responded, 'then no one will ask you anything.' Where did I go wrong? Was I initially intended to express gratitude for his interest? Were his feelings and the feelings of the audience in general my first priority? Was recognition of his likability a necessary gateway into his ability to apprehend my work? I really wanted to have the conversation he started. It occurred to me after this incident that an audience member might read all the relevant books on racism, see all the documentaries and films, know the correct phrases to mention, but in the moment of dialogue or confrontation, retreat into a space of defensiveness, anger, silence, which is to say, he might retreat into the comfort of control, which begins by putting me back into my imagined place. The words of Professor Claudia Rankine.
The Reverend Dr. Zolani Kachela is a Unitarian Universalist minister and the author of a number of books, among them, The Black UU Survival Guide. The book is just what its title suggests, a guide for people of color who have begun participating in a UU congregation. This excerpt, a true story from Reverend Dr. Cacella's own experience, offers one example of why a survival guide might be useful. Here's the breaking news. White UUs are often unaware of their rude treatment toward non-white UUs. Good intentions often collide with disrespectful acts or words. Add in microaggressions, and congregational life gets turbulent. Here's a situation I experienced once as a UU minister. The experience is an outlier for me, but not among Black, Indigenous, people of color, and it is absolutely a part of my UU survival story. You may have experienced something like it. One Saturday, I was on campus at the Eno River UU Fellowship in Durham, North Carolina, where I served as assistant minister. The church was closed. I was there retrieving something from my office. As I approached the building, I saw one of our members, whom I knew and knew me, peering inside the dark office space. I had said to her, "How are you doing? What are you up to?" She responded by asking me, "Are you the janitor here?" To which I said, "I'm Zolani. You were in my office a few days ago." Her inability to recognize me caught me by surprise, but her instinctual assumption that I was the custodian stunned me. It's one thing not to know me out of context, as they call it. It's another to assume the Black guy at the mostly white UU church must be the cleaning man.
Amanda Gorman is America's Youth Poet Laureate and renowned as the most recent inaugural poet. In a recent essay in the New York Times, she shared a number of reasons why she almost didn't read her poem at the inauguration. All of them reasons, good reasons, to be afraid. She overcame her fear and read her poem, The Hill We Climb, to great acclamation. A year later, she wrote about her fears, and she ended her essay with these words: "And yes, I still am terrified every day. Yet fear can be love trying its best in the dark. So do not fear your fear. Own it, free it. This isn't a liberation that I or anyone can give you. It's a power you must look for, learn, love, lead, and locate for yourself. Why? The truth is, hope isn't a promise we give, it's a promise we live. Tell it like this, and we, like our words, will not rest, and the rest is history." Amanda Gorman.
In the Unitarian Universalist Meditation Manual, Voices from the Margins, UU minister, Reverend Dr. Zolani Coachella, author of the Black UU Survival Guide, offers his thoughts about what it takes to build a world that might realistically be described as post-racial. And no, we aren't there yet. He advises, "We get good at what we practice. To become exceptional, you must do two things. First, you must practice with intention. You have to aim to become very good. If you set out just to know how to do something or do it good enough, then that is how good you will become. Second, you must practice a lot and consistently. Becoming an expert demands about 10,000 hours of practice. That's 20 hours a week, every week, for about 10 years. The notion of intentional practice also applies to how we become the beloved community. It's not enough to just say that we are post-racial. We have to practice being post-racial. We have to put in the time." The words of Reverend Dr. Zolani Coachella.
When I was in the second grade, our family moved from the completely white suburb in which we lived since the time I was a baby and into the city of Baltimore. And I began attending an integrated school, a school that had both whites and blacks. And it was a time when, well, it was new to a lot of people, but not to the kids in the school. And it was certainly new to me. Now, that first day at recess, a circle of girls formed to play one of those circle games where everybody holds hands. Now, I don't remember the name of the game that we were playing, but I do remember that as I was invited to join the circle, and I took the hand of the girl to my left, and then I turned to take the hand of the girl to my right, and this was a black girl, and she held her hand out to me, and you know, her hand looked different. And there was this moment when I hesitated to take her hand because I just was a little bit afraid. And she gestured impatiently with her hand as if to say, "Come on, hurry up." And I took it because when somebody invites the new kid into a circle, the new kid is wise to accept. And my reaction in that moment was, oh, feels just the same, duh. And we played. The well-being of all of us depends on the well-being of all of us. And yet, centering whiteness is what American society does. Allowing the centering of whiteness diminishes us all. One of Unitarian Universalism's deepest values is the inherent worth of every person. To give life and meaning to that value, it's necessary for each of us to really see the other, to see, to know, to welcome. For those who are centered in our society, there is fear of what's different, fear of not being centered and losing what they're supposed to have as a birthright. In the circle game when I was a second grader, that fear of difference was present. Now, years later, I'm only beginning to understand how the unconscious fear of losing something, power, position, may affect me, a white American, even in my attempts to live my most cherished values. For those who are marginalized in our society by race, language, gender, sexuality, national origin, there is in so many encounters the pain of being unseen or seen only in a way that marginalizes. The vivid moment Dr. Zolani Kachela relates when he, the minister who a few days before had been talking to the member of the congregation in his own office, was mistaken for the custodian, is only one obvious example. I have come to understand that white Americans often don't fully see people of color. Or maybe I mean that I don't fully see people of color, and I'm generalizing to all white Americans. I haven't mistaken a UU minister for the custodian, a UU minister of color for the custodian, but I have called one Black colleague by the name of another. And in the bafflement that came from being politely corrected, to my chagrin, I realized that I could make the same mistake again. I know this in my bones. I know it because when I'm the parent of 2 children of color, and when my adopted Korean daughter was a young teen, she went to a party for Korean adoptees. And until I came to pick her up that day, I didn't realize the ways in which I had marshaled the stereotype of little Asian girl to identify my own daughter. Because when I walked into the room, there were all these kids who looked amazingly a lot like my daughter. And I realized in that moment that I had, despite all the connection that I felt and feel and knew was real to my daughter, that still in my mind, I wasn't seeing her as individually as I had imagined. I was seeing her race. So even how a white American sees can be affected by our unexplored assumptions about race. And in so many ways, those unexplored assumptions are deeply embedded in our consciousness. I'm fortunate that for half my life, my children have been willing to call me on my unthinking assumptions, the assumptions that are there because they arise from my upbringing as a white American in a racialized society. Half of my life and all of theirs. So I say, with a deep awareness of my own failings, that white Americans, no matter how welcoming their intentions, often see Black, Indigenous, people of color only through cobwebs of stereotypes and assumptions. Those stereotypes and assumptions are not the reality. In Claudia Rankine's book, Citizen, the one she was discussing when the older white man asked, "How can I help you?" she recounts and documents many moments in which those stereotypes play out. One moment that took my breath away, that's in her book, Citizen, occurred at an airport check-in desk. There was a line for first-class check-in. A white man went to the front of the line, stepping ahead of two people of color. It took both of them and the white gate attendant to persuade the man that, yes, the two people of color at the front of the line were both flying first class. Professor Rankine's persistent attempts to have conversations with white Americans about how they don't see people of color is fascinating, but reading her accounts of those conversations is watching her run headlong into the brick wall of white cluelessness. One of the white reviewers of Professor Rankine's book, Citizen, said that the stories of white cluelessness, yeah, I can say that word, cluelessness, made them afraid to engage, afraid to even try to have meaningful conversations across the barrier of stereotypes, afraid of expressing assumptions. Making assumptions was a foregone conclusion, afraid of being outed as not as perfect as they wish to be in the realization of their progressive understanding. The white man who asks, "How can I help you?" is angry when Professor Rankine says he should be asking, "How can you help you?" And yet, that is the right question, because the well-being of us all depends on the well-being of us all. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. told us that. He said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." This is why Professor Rankine replied to the white man's question that his question should be, "How can you help you? How can I help myself?" Suggesting that he might need help, that there was something for him to learn, perhaps implied that his power in their dialogue about race was not what he believed it to be. Losing power can be a scary thing. Asserting superior power can be the assertion of control. The offer to help, as well-intentioned as it may be, can be an affirmation of the power to help. The helper is better off, is in control. Perhaps the man's anger came from a deep-seated, unconscious fear of not being in a power position, of needing help. I can't know, but to me, it seems likely. I've always thought of fear as the opposite of love. Fear, not hate, the opposite of love, because so much of hatred springs from fear. So when Amanda Gorman said that fear is love trying its best in the dark, I really had trouble with that idea. Then I remembered something I actually learned long ago. Fear can be a signal of what's going on underneath, inside me, in the upside down. So in any situation, if I can recognize that I'm feeling fearful, if I can pause just long enough to notice that feeling and stay with it, I can stop myself from saying or doing anything that is a reaction based in fear. I can recenter myself in the love that is the fire at my heart's center. The value and way of living that I cherish most in this life. And in that moment of pause, of not reacting, there is room to extend my hand not in help but in friendship, to listen with an open heart, to learn something new. There will always be discomfort in that moment of recentering, the moment that fear can signal, the moment that's needed. But it is a blessed discomfort, a discomfort that opens me up if I will just hold on, just bear with it, so that I make space for what I do not yet know, so that I make space for the full humanity of the other person in the conversation. And in doing that, I make space for my own full humanity. Retreating, like that white man who spoke with Professor Rankin, into an assumption of a superior position, of being the one who can save, who can rescue with little strain, that is a formula for hiding my fear, for hiding from my fear, and hiding from what I don't know but still might learn. The Reverend Dr. Zolani Kachela reminds me about how much practice it takes to get good at anything, especially when it comes to widening the circle in a mostly white congregation, a mostly white denomination. We here at the UU congregation of Shelter Rock are a congregation of many diversities. We are diverse in theology, in nation and language of origin, of ethnicity, of gender, of sexual orientation, of race. If we are not as diverse as we aspire to be, perhaps it will help if we can begin sweeping away the cobwebs of assumptions that prevent us from truly seeing one another. And that is not easily done. But it begins in each liminal moment, each time something triggers fear. Maybe in that moment, a coherent response isn't possible. Maybe all that's possible is to pause, to listen, to be open. And in that moment, fear is love trying its best. Our closing words, a prayer for living intention, are by Unitarian Universalist minister and a friend of mine, the Reverend Joseph M. Cherry. And these words are published in that meditation manual, Voices from the Margins. If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving.
As our worship service draws to a close, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of commitment, or the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts into all the world.